adjustments in the meetings that I've read.
The one I didn't want to get involved with myself, right? We're getting questions from people watching online.
Oh.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
I wish we knew where. You know, the North Pole. What causes melting? Oh yeah, we have that.
Thank you. Oh. Your questions are terrific, impeccable. Would you like me to do the questions now, before we proceed? Okay. Richard, where are you? Are you there? Can you hear? Okay, good. I looked for you over there and you weren't there. Oh, Gail, you're still here. You disappeared for a little bit. I was afraid maybe you had left because I hadn't solved your problem.
No, I was in the kitchen. I can hear you though. From
Oh, good. Okay. This is from the student watching online. If mistakes are made during a birth and the person is then born handicapped, is this mistake karmic for the mother, for the injured child, the family? Had the child been born without this mistake, he or she would have been and should have been normal. So does karma enter into all this? First of all, let me just reach out through space and touch you, because I'm sure this question is arising from personal experience, and that there is suffering and confusion in that experience, probably for all. Karma enters into all this definitively, actually. And this would be an example of individual karma, and because it's a family, also of group karma, or collective karma. But where my mind goes in reading this question is the statement or the question, had the child been born without this mistake, he or she would have been and should have been normal. What is normal? What is normal? Normal is a convention of mind. It's a convention that we think the way most people look is the way all people ought to look. Or what most people can do is what all people ought to be able to do. And we recognize that injuries and accidents and illnesses and all kinds of happenstances can impact us in unpredictable ways that change the way we have to live in the world, physically or mentally, because it applies also to mental illness and mental injuries, like what I described and what you've seen the evidence of with me. But as I get, the older I get, the more I'm happy to have that excuse, because at least, I'm not dementia. I don't have dementia yet, but that's in the family too, so we'll see what happens. But the idea, this is looking at not so much initially from the Dharmic point of view, but I just want to speak to this because the idea that what is normal, meaning what is most prevalent and what appears to be according to the design, I don't mean the design, intelligent design, I mean the design of the body and the potentials of the body, is used as normative. In other words, the convention of what things normally are supposed to look like for us, how we're supposed to look and how our bodies are supposed to behave and how our minds and our speech and our hearing and all of our senses are supposed to function. Because of this duality, this innocently born but very pernicious duality of self-other that I spoke about this morning, we take what doesn't look normal and we contrast it with what we consider normal. In other words, we make normative as in you can't, oh you should, so something is lesser with you. In other words, something's wrong with you. But there's nothing wrong with you. I mean, even if you are, quadruple amputee, there's nothing wrong with you. You're missing some appendages that you came in with for reasons that were undoubtedly traumatic in some way. But there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. There never has been and there never can be something wrong with you. There may be something inconvenient, as my dear friend Jerry might attest to, or as I with my walking poker or whatever, or Richard with his walker. Talk about inconvenient. A walker is inconvenient, but the body, although it inconvenienced, doesn't denote what is positive, negative, good, bad, right, wrong with the person. not in any respect. And yet, I mean, even I who have disabilities sometimes relate to other people with disabilities as if they can't hear, for example. You know, and people in wheelchairs, I'm sure you've noticed, as I did when I was in the wheelchair for however many months it was, people speak, you're down here, they're up there, and they speak over you or to the person who's with you, you know. And so we in a sense, we tend to dehumanize a little bit, and that can be even with somebody we dearly love, you know. So, haven't you read accounts by parents who've had a child with Down syndrome, for example, or cerebral palsy, or some other very severely impactful birth trauma or congenital condition, and how their initial reactions, including autism and people on the spectrum, they come initially they have grief, and they have to recover from their grief that the child isn't normal in order to be open to the gift that the child brings in that condition of birth. And so that's where my mind went when I read this, that I would invite our friend from, I wish I knew where you are, but you're right here with us for the moment, invite you to really consider that normal is a convention of the conventional mind. We all have potentials we're not going to fulfill. Yes? Even no matter how normal we look and act, there's always going to be potentials that we come in with that we're not going to completely fulfill. So think of normal as a label that we apply and sometimes misapply, and every time you think of it, you could lift it. You could just lift the label and look at the being. Do you remember I'm sure you'd both remember I can't remember the woman's name, but in Kanab, the wonderful, up in Utah, where Laura and Yitze and I have known each other before, there's a rescue, an animal rescue sanctuary called Healing from the Heart. No, not Best Friend. No, Healing from the Heart. Yeah. And all of the animals, the woman who started it, she started it after her husband committed suicide. There's something about that connection that to me is very significant. She went out and rescued wounded animals. So there are tortoises missing part of the shell. There are dogs and goats that haven't got their hindquarters entirely. And so there are these amazing prostheses that have been created so that these deeply wounded beings can still get around. And they're getting around just fine. Seriously, the disability is in the eye of the beholder. When you see these dogs and goats racing around with these wheelies on their back ends, it's just astonishing. And it changes the perspective with which you re-enter the people world, where we look at this as diminishment. Well, this has been quiet time for Jerry in a way that his other life was not. And when you go and sit and talk with Jerry, what you get is a compendium of wisdom gathered over years. Well, you do. You always couch it in other people's writings. So he'll pull something out of his pocket and say, let me read you this. But you know it's what he's thinking, yeah? Otherwise, he wouldn't have thought it was important enough to put in his pocket. So every time you see yourself reacting to what does not look normal, lift it and just abide there for an instant without the elaboration that normally goes along with that we're barely even aware of. Barely even aware of it. Yeah? So, my friend who's listening in from somewhere else, thank you for your wonderful question. And karma, yes, does enter into it. Do you know, let me just take this moment to say a little something about how to work with karma. Every appearance and experience arising in your life is karmically created. You will never experience, this is practically a direct quotation from Garchen Rinpoche, you will never experience at all in your life anything for which you have not created the cause. And that doesn't mean that you've created the cause in this lifetime. As he also had said, as I mentioned earlier in the morning, the more severe the appearance of negativity, of negative consequences from karma, the more likely or certain it is that those causes were set, if you look at the construct of many lifetimes ago. So don't get hung up on thinking about yourself or anybody else in terms of, well, they were, I'm not even going to try to figure out an analogy to use, but anyway, so there's a funny response I have to that teaching from Rinpoche, which is that karma is trustworthy. I can deeply trust in the intimate, precise operations of my karma. Because inasmuch as all the negative seeds of karma that I have laid down on the ground, whether the ground was at that time fertile or sere, all of those will come into being. They'll all fruit up good. And you know what else? So will all the positive ones. So no more excuses. So the positive ones we tend not to think of as karma. We tend to think of, oh, well, I studied so hard, or, I had rich parents, or I'm graceful. That's not me speaking. Or I was born attractive, or, whatever. We tend to think of that as we attribute it to some qualities of our own, whereas the negative karma we would really like to attribute to somebody else's dereliction, and then sue them in court so they'll pay us for it. That's the American way to work with karma, right? So the intimate trustworthiness of karma means that your intention, your motivation and intention, moment to moment to moment, is what matters. And all of our practice should take into account that fact. And that our practice of meditation should be to see the operations of the mind. And the way to see them is by observing what thought forms arise. And I'm sorry, I must have sounded as if I was shutting you down earlier. I didn't mean to do that, Carl. But when we look at the teachings of karma and at the operations of the emotional afflictions, the grasping, repulsing, and elaborating, we need to see. We need to see that. Otherwise, we don't believe it. Right? So, in case I forget and don't get to it in the course of our time together, let me just give you a key for working with karmic appearances. Now, like all my keys, they're bright and shiny and they work in the lock that you put them into. Because I get them from the Dharma. It's the locksmith, keysmith that I most patronize. So when faced with karmic consequence, which means anything that's happening in your life, inner or outer, whether it's got positive connotations for you or negative connotations for you, whether it's bringing happiness momentarily or suffering momentarily, here's the key. There are 3 keys, and they correspond exactly to the 3 locks, which we call the 3 poisons. Right? They lock us in habitual behavior that becomes karmic predisposition. So that's grasping, aggression, and confusion. Notice I'm calling these 3 by different names at different times, so you see what the continuum is of those things. So these 3 solutions or keys arise immediately from these 3 locks. Don't grab it, don't push it away, and don't make up stories about it. And you will become free. Many times people have said to teachers, I can't follow your teachings, they're too simple. It's like, I know it can't be that simple. I have to promise you this. It is this simple. It's just not as easy as you might like that simplicity to be. We need to work. Effortlessly, okay? There's a little conundrum for us. We need to effortlessly work on the path. So, there you have it. Shall I go now? No, I'll read you another question. Okay. These are really wonderful questions. Please fill up my basket here. Then I won't have to think ahead. I can just come in and sit down and, okay. Dear Lopon Barbara, my question is about expression. In the age of Me Too, and then there's an exclamation point after that, in the age of Me Too and the political circus arena of the day, especially in common spaces that do not feel safe, can you speak to the urges of necessity to speak up for oneself and others? How to engage conflict with compassion, especially when we don't feel it? Whew. And that's like what Gail was asking earlier. So this is...
That says it better than I did.
I thought you were very eloquent, Gail. You were very explicit. It was very good. First of all, common spaces that do not feel safe. And this points to the way I would invite us to think about the rest of the question. We do not feel safe when we think we might be harmed in some way. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Who is this we? Who is going to be harmed? It's an advanced state of love that is so profound and expansive that truly we recognize the other as being more important than we are. And most of us are not there yet for more than short periods of time. With your child, I'm sure you're there, or with your dear loved friends. That person can be more important than you sometimes, and the person injured in the street can for a moment be more important than we are. But the ordinary run of our activities of body, speech, and mind is more directed by self-interest. And if not a crass, an obvious self-interest, at least self-reference. That means that all of our actions and words are conditioned by their relationship to us in some way. So genuine altruism, genuine expanded recognition of other before self is beyond where we usually find ourselves, granted. But when we're in that state, even if for a moment, that's a state of bodhicitta, that's a state of freedom from self for a moment. And in that state, there is no one to be harmed. Because if our attention and awareness and love are for another being, it's not on ourselves. And for that, in that situation, there is no harm. Now, where you work, and where some of us live and so on, I can imagine that certain kinds of conversations, that your part in that might bring up a lot of aggression and so on. And I'm thinking that may be part of what you're speaking from. I don't think I have an answer to that other than love. And I'm not even stopping at compassion. I'm going directly to love. Rinpoche told me, and many of the things that I share with you that Rinpoche told me are not public teachings, but are the Barbara by the knee teachings, you know, and the pith instruction, we call it the whispered instruction. And I'm so glad that I have the opportunity to share them more broadly. And many of them are in the book that is coming out. Where was I? This is a test.
Barbara by the knee instruction. You went right to love, not to just compassion, but to love.
Thank you.
The political thing.
An amanuensis. An amanuensis is somebody who follows the wise person around writing down what the wise person says. That's not me. She is actually doing that, though. She's texting on her phone. She's not texting. She's typing on her little smartphone what's being said. Just like, imagine those fingers in an adult. I mean, she's over 30. How does she learn how to do that? Anyway, so he said to me at one point that courage comes from compassion, and great courage comes from love. Please remember that. We will need that instruction. Sometime in our life, we'll need that instruction. In the Dharma, the meaning of compassion is said to be that one desires that the other being not be suffering, and perhaps even to lift away that one's suffering if possible. And that the meaning of love is the desire that that one be happy and to do whatever one can to bring that person to happiness. Well, which one is asking more of you in terms of your vast caring for another? And I'm not putting compassion down or love up or love down or compassion up, but I'm certainly aware in my experience of countless thoughts moving along in my mind stream of a caring concern, compassionate caring concern for somebody who's in pain or afflicted in some way, and the desire that that person not be in pain. But it doesn't weigh the same in my experience as the desire, for example, for somebody who appears like an enemy to really be happy. That's a much bigger leap. And I think, Gail, that's the answer to your whole quandary. That person is basically in my heart as a beloved child. That's my answer to the question you raised, that when I realized where my mind was going, I took my mind as the path, and I brought that being into my heart, and ensconced that being right there. Can't get away. Neither of us can get away, right? I have to love that person, and so that's the commitment I made the next morning, right? I made that commitment. I have to love that person unconditionally, absolutely. So here's the corollary to that. This will be familiar to David and Gladys and Ani, because I spoke of it a couple, was it last month only? Yes, in California when we were together. When you commit to absolute love, from that moment on, everything that is not that arises before you as your teacher. Do I need to repeat that? Mm-hmm. When you commit to absolute love, from that moment on, Everything that is not that will arise before you as your teacher. So it makes, Gail, doesn't it make the quandary completely simple and direct and unavoidable?
And it reminds me of the book Feeding Your Demons.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, if it looks great, don't grab it. If it looks awful, don't push it away. If it looks really mind-boggling and confusing and you're in a total state of panic, don't make up a story about it. So I don't think I addressed specifically some of the other things you said in this question. The urges of necessity to speak up for oneself and others, yes. Haven't you gone through the questioning of yourself as to what would you have done in 1938 in Europe? I have. What would you have done? Would you have spoken up, or would? So sometimes speaking up is an action that's silent, to protect, yeah, and not to endanger further, and not. Oh, I'm so sorry, everybody out there in the whole world. Just heard that. And not to. Sometimes you have to make extremely difficult choices about whether you're going to. Risk yourself and therefore possibly not be able to help more, or whether you're going to, in that moment, just speak truth to power. I mean, the circumstances like what people are facing all over the world are in our lives as well now, in smaller doses and with smaller display, perhaps. But there's a wonderful book by a friend of Regina and Jerry and whose name is Francisco Cantu. What's the title of the book? On the Border?
The line becomes a river.
The line becomes a river. He wanted to understand what was happening with the people involved in the border crises in this country, the southern border. And he himself is of Mexican-American heritage. He has those two lines in his history. And so he became a Border Patrol agent to find out firsthand. And he wrote an extraordinary book about it. Regina can give you the title again if you want it. It's exquisite. And it challenged his mind and his heart profoundly. And he wrote about it exquisitely. So he had to make choices. And they're not always obvious, and sometimes we don't know till afterwards whether it was a choice that we would say was right or wrong, you know, or wise or unwise. I remember quite some years ago I was in the middle of the civil war in a Central African country, and I was given the possibility of sheltering some people who were targets. And I was quaking in my sandals and didn't know what was the right thing to do exactly. I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know if it was right because it might compromise other people, the people with whom I was working. But I did it anyway, and I certainly never had any regrets about it. But sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you just don't know. And I mean, the tried and true is, well, don't endanger yourself. But, you know, we're talking at a different level. Well, we would say, well, why not? You know, in certain circumstances, why not endanger yourself, you know? So, do you think I've responded enough to? Okay. This is a very interesting question. Question on something that could go under the construct of spiritual bypass. Have you heard that expression before? Spiritual bypass? We talk about spiritual bypass surgery. It's like when you don't want to deal with something as it is and you give it a nice spiritual construction and solution and you're done. But the original issue never got addressed. Right? Is that a pretty good summary of it? Yeah. I was working with a woman client. She's on a path. Her life partner used ways of speaking to her with language of spiritual concepts to argue or dismiss her needs in relationship. For example, she told him she needed a commitment of monogamy. Another example, she told him she wanted to create safety and feel safety between them. In response, she heard him say statements such as, "We are all one, not separate. There's no separation." I guess your question is somewhat stimulated by having heard those words this morning, perhaps. Your need for commitment and safety is your problem, your responsibility, were other things that he said to her. While there is an ultimate truth in that view, it seemed like a spiritual out, almost using concepts out of context. Is this a confusion of applying ultimate to relative? How do we check ourselves for misusing teachings of nature of reality to avoid personal responsibility? How might we find clarity and respond to such moments of confusion? Well, those moments for the person who's on the receiving end of the spiritual bypass injunctions and the person who's on the giving end of them, those moments are not moments of confusion. The clarity is right there. All you have to do is look at your mind to see what your motivation is. The mind that sees confusion is the mind that's free of it. In that instant, completely free. But it's just an instant. You have to keep doing it. There's a distinct lack of compassion in those relationship descriptions. So when we find ourselves going to right-wrong thinking and speaking, we're protecting ourselves in some way. We're defending ourselves in some way. I don't mean the person who's on the receiving end. I mean, but it's a partnership when something like that's happening. There are two people involved in that kind of a dialogue. My responsibility is to pay attention to the condition of my mind. Your responsibility is to pay attention to the condition of your mind, and for each of us to be as considerate and respectful and kind as we can be. If we're not acting like that, stuff happens. But it starts to happen in the mind. So I don't think there's confusion in the situation. I think there's clarity, and the person who's behaving, putting down the partner, is behaving strategically to defend him or herself and in some way. And the person who's not sure that she or he should put up with that is taking refuge in confusion from a very difficult choice that might need to be made about speech or action. Yeah, so that's my take on that question. What do you think? Whoever asked that question, just give me a nod if that helps a little. Cool, thank you. Okay.
Can I just ask one little, but that's a karmic,
Speak up a little bit.
but that scene there is a karmic,
Oh yeah,
right, where the two parties meet and there's that happening. They've, it's.
individual karma and duo karma, both.
Right.
Yeah. You will never experience anything that you yourself did not create a cause for. That doesn't mean that the other person's off the hook, right? Because it's true for that person too. So to say, this is your karma, leave me alone, is what we might generously call self-serving. Yeah? Okay, here's another question. This is the last question of this session. So, given the confusion of personality view of the English word love, what other phrase or words can convey what is meant by the English translation love or loving kindness? Well, I just might have to read you a little piece from my book. I'm going to try not to do this very often because I know it can be really boring to be read to. But Hey, I wrote it, so, and you're my captive audience for the moment. I may not be able to find it, though. That's the only problem. Let's see. I think love is the right word. I think I think love is the right word. Let's reclaim love for love instead of using it for mushy something. Let's reclaim it in its power. So I'm going to read you a little bit. You okay? I know it's after lunch. It might put you to sleep, but I don't think so. Let compassion mount the mighty steed of love and turn them loose. Manes streaming, churning, flanks gleaming, eyes fierce with freedom. The whole lost, feral herd will follow them home. Love, limitless, indestructible, all-permeating, and empty of substance, reference, or condition, this is the ultimate meaning of the Dharma. Caring, concern, and compassion, these are bodhicitta, definitely. And then there is love, energetic, compelling, irresistible, wholly and irreversibly given to beings and the world. This is passion not as afflictive emotion, but passion as entirety, the entirety of body, speech, and mind, dedicated to the freedom of all, from here to the heart of enlightenment. Absolute love is uncreated and undying, changeless, non-referential, and omnipotent. It pervades all and contains all. It is this with which we are breathing in and out all the time. It is the basis, the method, and the completion of all our longings, all our aspirations. In a worldly sense, we would like to love and be loved, and to have a life filled with meaningful, loving relationships. That is precious, and it pales in the brilliance of even one moment dedicated to loving all beings without regard to outcome. 20 years ago or so, at my 50th high school reunion, my high school sweetheart and I talked, as we always had, about life and love. In our reunion book, he had written of the excellent experiences and accomplishments of his life, an active role in the civil rights movement, a significant photographic documentation of the aftermath of 9/11, an academic career as a beloved and respected professor, devoted to his students and to social justice. And then he wrote, "But I have failed at love." I read those words with shock, for I knew him to be a deeply loving person. So when we met at the reunion, I asked him about it. This big man, a long lifetime's active lover of people and the good, doubled over in weeping, confessing that he had failed at his intimate love relationships, both romantic and familial. I asked him how he'd failed. He could point only to troubles and loss, anger and sorrow and endings in relationships. But that is not failure. Failure would have been not to have loved. He had loved in all those relationships, deeply, loyally, generously, and he still aspired to love, or he wouldn't have been weeping. Not in any way had he failed at love. Our purpose is not to be loved. Our purpose is to love. So let's reclaim love. When I text, I often put that little Valentine heart in there. But most of the people I text to know that that little Valentine heart stands for this big thing that I just read about. We call it the great love. The great love. Contains all, includes everything, rejects nothing. It even embraces and cherishes the moments when you're aware that you're not loving. like a mother who never stops forgiving the errant child. Well, okay. Did you get it? Deal? Yay. Okay. Tomorrow is mostly going to be about that. With some methods to train us to open to that vastness of love. So I want to go back. Let's see, what time do we need to stop for? 3 o'clock? Maybe we won't take. Do you mind if we don't take a break right away? Everybody okay? If you have to go to the bathroom, would you just go and come back? You can get through without another cup of tea, can't you? There'll be a little break at some point, but not right now. This morning I spoke about how the Bodhisattva qualities, including this all-embracing unconditional love, reflect in the relative reality the ultimate nature of those qualities. Ultimate compassion, ultimate bodhicitta, ultimate love are reflected in what we experience in the day-to-day, yes? And I don't think that that's... it's not difficult to see that that's true in our own experience. So what that means is, and I think we touched on this morning, is that all phenomena and expressions and experiences, inner and outer, are the union of ultimate and relative, of absolute and relative, visible and invisible, of existence and being. And you received something called the Two Truths. It's called actually, what is this that neither begins nor ends? Yes? It speaks to this that I'm speaking of right now. So our purpose ultimately is to realize ourselves in that union, as that union. That is freedom. That is what we mean by liberation, is the dissolving, the dissolution of that false dualism that has been running us based on that innocent misapprehension of the nature of reality. So, in a way, to take the union, the ultimate non-separation of all phenomena and their nature, to take that as the beginning, which we're doing this weekend, is an example of what we mean when we talk about the resultant path in the Buddha Dharma. We take the aspired to result, the result to which we aspire, and the state for which we long, the state of union and completion for which we long, we take that as the path. We don't start with what's wrong with us. We start with the fullness, the completion, the perfection that we already are intrinsically, and we take that as the path. We practice on that. So when we do that, when we take the aspiration as the path, that commitment gives rise to the methods that will fulfill it for you uniquely, even if you are part of a tremendously broad and deep and centuries-old spiritual tradition. You still have to walk it yourself. Oh, nobody else can walk it for you. So you can be walking with myriads and generations. Your feet are still the ones that are putting one foot down and then the next foot. And the path opens up as you walk it. It's also still warm from the footsteps of those who have preceded us. But we still have to walk in their footsteps, not just worship the hand that's pointing somewhere, but get up off our butts and start walking the direction that's being pointed to. Yeah? It's not enough to sit and be thankful and devoted and grateful and moved to tears by the beauty and power of the teachings and the incredible kindness of the teacher unless you do what the teacher is giving you to do. Right? Follow the teachings. Do the practices. Otherwise, you're just a dilettante on the spiritual path, a window shopper. I know I'm speaking really gently. So, for me, from very early childhood, I was longing for truth. I have no idea. I have no explanation for that. I came in with that, which saved me a lot of time. I didn't have to ask what I was looking for. I just had to ask, why am I doing something other than that, and where is it, and how do I find it, and so on. It took me a long time to get to that place, because I was living in a culture in which there was no direction for me that I felt was really calling me to follow. I just wanted truth. And if you just check yourself for a moment, are you aware of longing? Yeah? And not just for a nice house, right? Are you aware you're aware of spiritual longing? Yeah? I'm looking at each one of you. I want to see who is and isn't aware of that. I don't see everybody nodding ahead, but I see enough to make me proceed. Yeah, Pam isn't looking, she's looking like she's riding a horse. That's that horse that's going to take you all the way. Yeah. Okay, so you might want to write this down too, Nelson. I'm not asking Nelson not to take notes this time. So here's what I learned from that implacable longing that was driving me all my life. Longing is a form of knowing. We don't long for that which we don't know. And we've talked about that, Elaine, remember? We don't long for something we've never heard of. We don't even long for something we've never actually experienced. So longing is a form of knowing, a form of memory. You can trust it, as long as it's not longing for the potato chip, for example. Oh, you want me to be able to long for the Lay's classic? The best. So, what I want to give you about longing is simply this: trust it and follow it with divine impatience. Don't let anything get in your way. Don't be misled. Don't be distracted. Just go for it. This life's going to end soon enough. And you don't know in the next lifetime whether you're even going to be a human being or not. You really don't. You don't know what you're going to be born as. We think it's likely that we'll be humans. In fact, if we think about next lifetimes at all, we're going to think about, we'll be much more in position to make great spiritual progress next time, because look what a wonderful foundation we are having. You could be a red ant. They're outside my pathway to my house. That's I see them every day. So give yourself to your longing. Give yourself to your spiritual longing. Let it become the opening of your path. Don't hold back. And, I look around the room, I see some young people. So we have a youth group here, as we like to have. We like to have a youth group. But I don't see very many members of the youth group. I think the youth group needs to do some recruiting. I see mostly members of the aging group. I'm the oldest in the room, I'm sure. Oh, no, maybe I'm not. Have we had this conversation? How old are you?
85.
Okay, you're ahead of me by 3 years. Is that right? No, I'm not good at adding or subtracting. Speaking of which, adding and subtracting, I want to say something that I may forget to say later. It relates to the Walmart observations I made this morning. The spiritual path is not an additive process. It's a subtractive process. Yeah? We don't have to get something we don't already have. We just need to undo what's done up too tightly and abandon that which we've been clinging to. In other words, to sweep away. Sweep away, sweep away. And spiritual practice is the good new broom that sweeps clean. That's the broom. But to take up spiritual practice requires some aspiration, or desperation. Desperation, perhaps, because one's aspiration seems so far away from being fulfilled. But it's fulfilled not over there, or down there, or up there. It's fulfilled right here, moment to moment to moment. That's where the fulfillment of aspiration comes. It's like when you climb a mountain. You climb, and at the top, what a great sigh of relief, all that effort, and then you just look and, oh no, there's another mountain right there. And it goes on like that. It goes on like that. We're developing capacity as we go. Not capacity to attain enlightenment, but capacity to walk the path that will sweep away everything that obscures the naturally indwelling state of enlightenment that's already ours. We don't create enlightenment. We can't make it happen. And it's not even a good word. I'm not sure what the word is, but I haven't found... I like the word in French, l'éveil, but it just means the same thing as awakening means. And then you say, well, awakening from what? And then we say the dream, and it goes on from there. So enlighten, the big E, sometimes people refer to it as, so that we get away from the word enlightenment. But Buddhahood is a pretty good word. Because you don't have to be a Buddhist to be a Buddha or to be a Bodhisattva. A Bodhisattva can take any form that sentient beings need in any moment. So the next time on a really hot day here in the Southwest and you're just quaking in the heat and a little breeze comes by, just say thanks. So, the path of the Bodhisattva is not additive, it's subtractive. And it's also not directional, but it is qualitative, which is why I can say, I know this would sound very abstract, but so it's why I can say that the aspiration is fulfilled moment to moment to moment. Whatever fullness of presence you can be in with your heartfelt aspiration in any given moment, that fulfills the aspiration in that moment, and then you go on to the next moment. Your sails can always fill up with more wind. So when I say not directional but qualitative, there's no goal, there's nothing to achieve. We can't create the state of perfection, but we can reveal it. We can reveal it. That's what our practice is for. So, sweeping away what obscures, that would be the 3 poisons, or the 3 locks, for which I gave you the 3 keys. The afflictive emotions is what we call them, the 3 poisons. ignorance, grasping, repulsing, passion, aggression, ignorance, attraction, aversion, jealousy. These are the three with different names. You can see that there's a basket here that contains these. Those are the afflictive emotions, and the practice is to liberate them, which means to allow them to dissolve into their own nature, which is not other than the true nature of all phenomena, which is perfection. They too are a union of relative and absolute. All appearances, including our worst hatreds, our muckiest disgustingnesses, they're all a union of relative and ultimate. So nothing is without that light inherent. Inherent makes it sound too solid, but so I want to give you a little bit of an overview of the what are called in the Dharma the three trainings of the Bodhisattva. They're talked about sometimes as the three stages or the three levels of development or practice. But the three trainings is best because it's less, it doesn't sound as if it's judging among them as one's better or not. There are three different threads, shall we? I'm going to start mixing metaphors here and probably hang myself in them. The title of my book, or the tentative title of my book, is Brave, Generous, and Undefended. And that actually points to the three trainings. The first training is really about karma. And you'll find in the 37 practices, they're laid out in this order, actually, in a general way, and I'll go over that with you at some point, because I think it really helps us make sense of the verses in terms of what they're there's an internal structure to that presentation of just 1 through 37. There's actually an internal structure, and it is the three training structure. So the first training, let's call it brave, is to see and take responsibility for one's own mind and one's own condition and one's own actions, one's karmic causes that one is laying down. And it brings us to see our confusion and to contemplate its causes. And when we contemplate its causes and its results, we can see really demonstrated in our own life. We don't have to have huge, vast ideas about, many lifetimes. We can see it right in our own life, how many years we've had and what a given week or month might look like to us. It almost always happens when I'm teaching in this temple that a fly tries to get into my mouth. So I'm sure it's somebody who has, a being who's had exposure to the Dharma before and wants the Dharmic teachings. So it's always a little bit of a dance. Will I let the fly into the mouth? And then what happens? Anyway. But Nelson's laughing because he's seen this happen so many times. So when we actually see, if we actually make a study of karma in our own lives, we'll see gradually, if we're really asking honestly to see what causes have brought about this kind of result, we don't need to know that in 1957 we called Aunt Hattie an old witch. We just need to know that unkindness brings unhappiness. For Aunt Hattie perhaps, but also for oneself. Yeah? And it's for oneself that is most important because we're setting seeds of karma in our own mind stream that will come to fruition. It's not if, it's when and how. So as we look at our own mind's condition and our actions of body and speech, as well as what's happening in the mind, we'll begin to see patterns. Begin to see patterns of speech that reflect certain patterns of thought that eventuate in certain patterns of activity that outpicture then as certain patterns in relationships, like that. And we've all been doing that, but we've been doing it psychologically because we're that kind of a culture. So we've been looking, our mother made us do it. We've been looking at material cause, material events, actual precipitating events and circumstances. We've been looking at those as the causes of our confusion and suffering. They're not. The causes are not in circumstances and conditions. Conditions condition us, but they're not causes. The causes are in the mind stream. And that sounds so simple and dogmatic, but it's really important for us to understand. Otherwise, we keep looking outside to find the causes of what's inside. That doesn't make any sense. Even terrible trauma, which causes huge suffering of the mind, it's in the mind that the suffering is experienced, and it's in the mind that it's being reified or isolated somehow. Like a tumor enclosed, so that the suffering is not all pervasive but can be contained. At some point, I would love to have a time to really talk about trauma from the spiritual perspective. I think it's really important that we understand it because we all do it. We all experience trauma. So, conditions are conditioning. They're not causation. So we need to look within for the causes of our confusion. And that's also where our power lies. Because we can't control conditions most of the time, and circumstances are not under our control. What is under our control is our mind. We don't think of it as being under our control. We don't think we can control it. But we can choose. Even if you don't think of the paradigm of control, think of the paradigm of choice. We can choose to what we give our attention. We can choose we can choose what we nourish in our habit structures. We can choose our actions. We can choose our speech. A thought may come and go so randomly that we think we can't choose it, but through practice, you can learn to allow the thought to have its lifespan and to learn how to relate to it during the three main phases of its lifespan. Bring me back to that on the last day if I don't get there, okay? You see, I have some intention for this retreat. We'll see if there's a lot coming up. So there's something else I wanted to say here about the... Okay, so brave, the first level of training, is when we start to see how we're creating negative karma for ourselves, and how we're therefore adding to the suffering of the world and our own. And so this is the point at which we become capable of conscious choice. When we can see the actual operations of our mind, the dynamics of our own mind, we become at choice. Until then, we're just buffeted. Yeah? But when we're at choice, we have power. And responsibility. And so the lesson in brave, in that first level of training, is to be willing to brave the untamed mind. To see it for what it is, to see what's happening, moment to moment to moment. And when we really see that condition that we're in, it's just very easy to have compassion for others who are suffering from the same craziness that we're suffering from. It's very natural, very natural. At first there can be the impulse, I've never heard anybody speak about this before, but I've experienced it personally, so I'll speak of it. At first, when we see that our suffering and the suffering of others is the same, basically, there can be the impulse to denigrate or disdain the other, because we are denigrating ourselves and disdaining ourselves so much when we see the things that we've done and said and the kinds of thoughts that are in our minds that we let pass really quickly and don't even acknowledge that we're recognizing. We go past them so fast. It's like we're running like crazy to get away from that thought that we don't want to know we had, or cringing at remembering an action that we took or words we spoke. I mean, I know I'm not the only one in the room who has these kinds of charming reflections. So we can want to push away the other and make our suffering less by denying the other person's suffering being the same, so that we don't have to really acknowledge our own. If we can push the others away, our own can also be pushed away. So we take responsibility by looking right at our mind. That means looking right at our thoughts and our reactions and emotions and so on, but we call them thoughts in kind of a generic way, or arisings. We call them arisings in the mind. And at some point, we really do just kind of give up the self-defense thing of oh, I didn't really think that thought, or since I didn't act on it, it wasn't important. And then the heart begins to be able to recognize the suffering of another as not different in kind than our own. And that fellow feeling is a beautiful but still slightly tangled up root of great compassion. Tangled up because there's a lot of self-reference still at this point, but that's all right. It will lessen. But when I know my suffering, and when I'm not personalizing my suffering and making myself special about it in some way, or in a negative way or a positive way, then I can recognize your suffering and my own as just suffering. I don't have to name every gradation of it or every thread of it. I don't have to name every imagined origin of it or outcome of it. It's just suffering, and it's the nature of samsaric existence. That's what samsaric existence is, suffering, karmically caused. And this recognition of the mutuality of suffering gives rise to the desire to free us all. As long as you are still particularizing suffering, mine or yours, we're desiring to free me or you. It's when we see the universality of suffering as the actual condition of beings who are entrapped in karmic cause and consequence, that's when we begin to recognize, I long to free us all from this prison of cyclic existence, where we keep going round, around, and round, around again. You know, myriads of forms, myriads of dimensions of existence. And so this gives rise to what is called renunciation. Big word, scary. I don't know anybody who starts off desiring to renounce worldly existence. Maybe transcend, right? But not renounce. But it's not about renouncing worldly existence. It's about renouncing the causes of suffering, right? We are in worldly existence. That's where we are right now, because we have not stabilized our knowing that we are inseparable from perfection itself. That's why we're here, until we can really stabilize that insight, that knowing. So, renunciation leads us to becoming willing, very delicately at first. Like putting your toe in the cold water. Being willing to consider, I know this is going to sound so obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway. Being willing to consider abandoning attachment, aversion, and confusion. Being willing to consider abandoning the causes of suffering. Not abandoning suffering. If you go for abandoning suffering, you're going to abandon the sufferer. So we're not abandoning suffering, we're taking the whole thing, but we are going to abandon the causes of suffering. We're mostly not there quite yet, perhaps, but I'm just going to drop that into the bucket of the mind. I remember when I first realized I had, for the first time in my whole life, and this was late in the game, this was not when I was 15, I first had an inkling that at some point I was going to abandon attraction. That I would want to no longer experience attraction. Well, I could hardly breathe. I started to gasp. It was so radical and so inconceivable. It gave me a considerable insight into how little I understood of what was going to be involved in sweeping away the obscurations that occluded my mind from seeing its own purity and perfection. For attraction or attachment, we have attachment. For hatred and all negativity, we tend to have hatred. And for confusion, we just make up more stories. We're just confused about confusion. But for the other two, the two extremes of grasping and repulsion, we like the one and we really don't like the other. So you see our quandary? It's like being in a quicksand, right? Every time you bring your foot up, you sink further down with the other foot. Does that mean anything? Does it make sense to you at all what I'm describing here? So that means you've been looking at your minds. Because it's only in looking at your own mind that you'll see that. So all of you who have even the glimmering of a recognition of, oh yeah, I think maybe that's what she's talking about is what I've, seen or experienced. Even that slight glimmering of that means you really have been seeing your own mind. And then, so that stage, the second stage, is what I'm calling generous, because at that stage we are beginning to give rise to the great love. When we really see suffering as suffering and commit to freeing us all from its causes, that's the great love. It's not an emotion, it's a state of mind, a state of being, yeah? And then comes the third level or the third training, which has to do with penetrating the illusion of duality. In this level of training in the Buddha Dharma, we are often doing what we call deity practice, where we have an idealized form, like many of the ones you see here, these paintings that we call thangkas around the temple, an idealized form representing and picturing back to us the sublime qualities of compassion, for example, or wisdom. And as we practice with that deity as an image of our sublime potential, the duality between us and deity begins to dissolve, and we recognize deity and you, not two. So this stage is what I call undefended. Undefended. We're no longer defending ourselves from what is within and what is without, and we're allowing the naked mind, the bare mind, to see its own nature. in all the reflections that come back to us from what we encounter, including an idealized deity form, or our best friend, or some turning of a tree limb, or a calamity in the world, a catastrophic event. We don't defend ourselves anymore. And the way that I think of this is very simple. We become able and willing to be with appearances and experiences, just in simplicity and directness, simply to be with what arises within or without. And this gives rise to recognizing union. This is where that leads, to recognizing union. So that's an overview of the 37 Bodhisattva practices as the 3 trainings. And Christina spoke of this being the first in a series of teachings. I'll be continuing to do this, not with huge frequency, because nobody really has the time to come here every third weekend or something, but on a fairly regular basis, so that we can start at the beginning of the 37 practices and move right through to the end, and do it with the depth and deep understanding. I've taught that material twice before in extended courses. The first one took 2 years, the second one took 1.5 years, and we were meeting weekly. It was great. It was great. I would like us to take a short break now, because when we come back, we're going to practice together. The brave part. Yes. And you're all familiar with the practice. We're going to do some version of it, I'm sure. So, but we'll do it with this kind of context in mind. Did I have the microphone in the right place this time?
Yeah.
Was it all right? I kept thinking, I can't see when I'm reading and have the microphone in the right place at the same time. So, oh well. Okay, so enjoy a short break. Let's come back. It's 3:30 now. Could come back at maybe 5 to 4, and actually be in the room at 5 to 4. Yeah. Okay. Great. Have a good break. I'm so happy to be with you. I'm so happy we're all here together. Do I need anything? My Bodhisattva friend Nelson wants to know, do I need anything? I am complete. I'm complete. I think I did enjoy.